something such as the human body as an analogy. You might only have one brain, but try living your life without it. And, we can joke around and say, well, there are people that we know that don't operate in life with a brain or intellect or common sense. Um, but the diversity that we have in life is critical for human consciousness to be able to evolve.
This is Chocolate and Coffee Break, a compassionate proposition, a space to share stories, bridge divides, and spark meaningful connections. So grab your chocolate, pour your cuppa, and let's break down barriers, one conversation at a time. And now, here's your host, Andrea Pudding.
And welcome to another episode of Chocolate and Coffee Break, a compassionate proposition. And I hope you've got your chocolate and your cuppa ready because we have another story to listen to. And I'm inviting you to be present and listen to this story. So today's guest, I had a conversation with around 6 years ago, and it deeply moved me. He was very vulnerable and shared with me his experiences of racism. Now, being a white person, I can't really understand these, but but this conversation deeply moved me, and it's one of those conversations that really compelled me to stay with Chocolate and Coffee Break and work at what I'm trying to achieve here. It helped me to, at that time, a saying came to me that I've stuck with is that just because it's not my story doesn't mean it's not my fight. So it's really important to me that we share this story, we share with his guest today, because I know it's going to open up something in me and maybe in you. So I'd like to introduce Stone Gye, and he is a counsellor, a strategist who works primarily with neurodivergent professionals, and we'll learn a little bit about that as we go. So welcome, Stone.
Thank you, Andrea. It's good to be here again.
Thank you so much for coming. So I love to start with a question from my heart-opening questions.
Sure.
And today the question is, when did you feel like an outsider? And did someone help you feel you belonged?
That's an interesting question. I think that I've always been an outsider. I am African American and grew up in Japan. So there's the homogenous nationalism where I didn't fit. And then going into the military where I was quite different from all of my peers. And then after leaving the military, I migrated to Australia. And a year ago, I migrated to France. And so I've always been in a position where I've been the only one or someone who was unique. As far as people supporting me to fit in, that hasn't really happened other than my own efforts. So I've been a coach for about 2 decades. And of those 2 decades, I've been a counselor for about 6 years.
So it's to hear that no, you never felt like you belonged kind of hits home to me, because I know that that's something that's very important to people, is to have that feeling of belonging. So what would that looks like to you? Is there anywhere that you feel like you just belong that fills you?
Well, with my vocation, I do have a belonging with that. I create space, and I think that was probably a catalyst for the work that I do, was to create spaces where people belong. And
Mm.
because I have multiple intersectionalities, so an intersectionality is something that is a minority of what is considered normal. And so in Western culture, the things that might be normal might be white and male, and anything that's different from that could be considered an intersectionality. In my case, I'm autistic, ADHD, African American. I'm 6'5", on and on and on. So there are a few things that are going to set me apart physically, and then also neurologically.
That sounds like a lot.
Um, well, it could be, but then if we look at something such as the human body as an analogy, you might only have one brain, but try living your life without it. And we can joke around and say, well, there are people that we know that don't operate in life with a brain or intellect or common sense. Um, but the diversity that we have in life is critical for human consciousness to be able to evolve. As an example, when you look at a country such as the United States, we can take the Naturalization Act of 1790, and in it, it states that a citizen is a white person, specifically a white male. So you have this country that their entire premise, the skeleton, the framework of it was built based on racism. And so when you have that as a framework, and we also need to remember that racism is a system. It's not I'm being mean to you or these types of things. They are systems that are designed to advantage one group of people and disadvantage another group of people. So when you look at that, when you look at the way a system is functioning to advance only a portion of the population, you can understand why the United States has some of the challenges that it has and why it's not able to evolve.
Mm. So how would you define racism?
Sure. So it is a system that is going to advantage one group over another, and it's usually to maintain a particular power. So it's a type of classism.
Mm. Do you have any particular stories that you feel you could just share with us along this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, even so, an example of racism is when I was in the United States. This is when I was in the military. I can remember uh, going to work for one of my schedules posts, and en route to work, I would be pulled over, not because I was speeding, not because of and I'd be in my military uniform. They would pull me from my car, um, draw a gun on me, and make me put my hands on the bonnet, and they would search me. They'd search my car, and this was a normal occurrence, and that wasn't because of anything other than my race, because they were profiling me. And so I would get back and I'd share the experience with some of my colleagues, and they would say, welcome to being in the United States. And I understand that some people might say, well, that happened a long time ago, or I've never had that experience. And the challenge with having a country or being in a system where racism dominates lifestyle is that disenfranchisement of an entire people group. It prevents the entire country from being able to evolve. Uh, for instance, everyone's heard about Maslow's works, hierarchy of needs.
Mm.
And then there was a gentleman named Claire Graves, and he expanded on that work with something called spiral dynamics. At the lower, and I'm going to simplify it. At the lower level, they say that at the lower level of spiral dynamics, it says that my life sucks, and so does everyone else's life, and that's individual. And then it goes up to a more collective uh, uh, level, and that might be people in prison, and they all say my life sucks. it's a collective. And then it goes up again to an individual who might say, I'm amazing, but everyone else sucks. And it's that level. You have your entrepreneurs, which
Yeah. So there's lots of levels here that we can dive into that are really important for us to look at. So let's just jump to a quick commercial break and see who's sponsoring us and who's helping us to make this show happen. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on the show.
When I hit perimenopause, all I heard was doom and decline until I took a sacred pause and I went searching for women who are radiant after menopause, like Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and the late Dr. Gladys McGarry, still shining at 103. In this book, I share their stories and wisdom and the magic that menopause truly holds. 7 Wonders of Menopause is a sacred reminder. You're not ending, you're returning. Available at independent bookshops in Australia and Amazon around the world.
Did you know that only 30% of speakers are women and that only 13% of panels feature women? In order to change that, there is now a directory at womenspeakers.com.au where you can go and search for a speaker. We also have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn under the name Australian Women Speakers, where you can just go and post about your event and women will respond.
Stone, I'd really like to hear your take on what does it actually cost a person to live with racism over time?
Sure, it's difficult to put a number on that.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'll give a personal example. So in addition to being autistic and ADHD, I also have epilepsy. And I experienced some injuries while I was in the military. So while I was in Australia, I went to the hospital so I could get some work done, and I was seeing a specialist who wouldn't listen to me, even though I provided them with scans, provided them with recommendations from other practitioners, and this is all evidence-based. But what happened was, because the specialist wouldn't listen, and this is very well documented, because I'm a minority, the doctor would not listen to me and started calling me hostile because I was asking questions. So for the doctor, because I was asking questions, it was as if I was confronting their authority rather than just trying to ask questions for understanding. And so they press the red security button, and it was a mess. And because of the way I look and my size, people will look at me and automatically think that I'm hostile. So what I had to do was organize to be able to go to a different country. In this case, I went to France. I set up my business there. And because France has more diversity than Australia, I was able to get in to see a doctor there and go through that process, and I was seen. So it was, the cost to me was time in Australia, seeing, and the medical system in Australia is wonderful if you are a particular demographic, and so there's a cost and time associated with that. And just because I'm a big guy and a combat veteran, etc., it doesn't mean that I'm immune to being treated in a way that's less than human or marginalized. So there's that cost. There's a cost of being dysregulated, or potentially being dysregulated and potentially having a seizure because of going into a hostile and stressful environment. And then there's travel, the cost of travel, going to another continent where I don't speak the language and having to go through that system. So the costs are exponential. And if you look at the cost to systems, so Australia paid a cost because they have practitioners who are biased and don't listen. And then another country also pay the cost. And why should they? I'm not a citizen. I mean, as of now, I'm a resident, but so that's an example. And then when you have an entire population where uh, racism is again part of the system, the, the costs are exponential. So it does touch and impact everyone.
I am really sad to hear that you had that experience, and it's being a white woman, it's really I don't have those experiences, so I don't really understand. I'm not aware of those things happening very often, so this is why it's so important for us to sit and have these conversations so that we can
Yeah, well, it's
learn
not
something.
something. It's not really something to be sorry about. It's like this is the way the system is designed.
Yeah.
And so when I notice things happening or I experience them directly, I don't take it personally because I recognize that this is the ecosystem. This is if we're a fish, this is the water that is going through our gills. So a way of addressing it is not through policy change. It's it's to transform the system. And until Western cultures are able to transform the system, and this is any country that was colonized, Australia, UK, uh, Canada, any of these countries that have been colonized and have killed most of their population, et cetera, et cetera, um, they have a real opportunity to look at their structures that are disenfranchising certain groups. They actually generate more revenue when they look to implement systems that are not extractive.
Mm.
So they have more for themselves. They can have more programs for education, for infrastructure, for being able to not just take care of the people, but create a platform, a foundation for a country where every person can thrive.
Yeah, and that's something that's extremely important, that we all have that place that we can thrive, and I hope that somehow I'm doing something towards that with this show.
Sure. Yeah, I've actually written a piece about it, and it's a piece that talks about the scientific, the evidence behind, or the rationale behind. It takes an evidence-based approach of what would happen if a country such as the UK, or the US or Australia, what would happen if we had reparations of some kind, and what would happen economically to a country that uh, invest in reparations, but from a structural perspective, not just giving out money, because reparations is correcting damage. It's like if you have a laceration that goes down to your bone and you say, okay, well, it's bleeding and I'll just tie it up and at some point it'll stop bleeding. Well, ultimately it's going to get infected. Maybe it will stop bleeding, but it'll get infected and you have to cut the whole thing off.
Mm.
And that's what's happening in a lot of these countries that don't have structures for reparations. Their entire country is dying, and the United States is a perfect example of that. They are no longer the global leaders that they promote themselves as being.
Yes, and that's something that's really important. I come from a naturopathic background, and the first thing we're taught is that you have to treat the cause. So if they're just putting a Band-Aid over the top, like you said, the wound is not going to heal. It's not going to be it's going to become infected and systemically horrendous results. And so that's what I see here, is that we really need to go deeper. We need to get to the cause of the problems and really work at healing those and finding what's actually happening, why it's happening, and fix it at the core rather than waiting for it to explode.
Sure. I'd also like to share that. So we talked about what is racism, and I'll share what racism is not.
Can we do that after the break?
Sure, absolutely.
So let's just take another quick break and watch for our sponsors and see how they're helping us.
Introducing 123 Read to Me. We give books to children who don't have books so they can succeed. Help us give away books to supported playgroups, kindergartens, schools, community events. Come and sort books. Donate money. $5 equals one book in the hand of a child. Because just one book a day creates clever, kind and confident kids. 123 Read to Me. If this interests you, let's talk.
You've ticked the boxes: career, commitments, calendar that's more packed than your pantry, but something's still missing. In Compassionate Purpose, Andrea Putting invites you to stop chasing busy and start living with intention. This book is about real fulfillment through small acts of compassion, purpose-driven service, and meaning that last. No pressure, no perfection, just purpose with heart. Compassionate Purpose, Discovering a Life of Fulfillment. Search for Andrea Putting on Amazon.
So Stone, please go ahead and tell us what racism is not.
Absolutely. So racism is not feeling discomfort or awkwardness or fear of saying the wrong thing when someone's doing that. That's not called. That's not racism. And being challenged or held accountable is also not racism. Having a cultural difference or disagreement is not racism. And talking about race itself is not racism. So racism isn't being called in. Racism is when systems stay untouched while harm continues.
Yes. So that's kind of deep, getting me thinking about all sorts of things about us really working at that deeper level. So
Exactly.
yeah.
You know, one of the things there are a lot of people who have conversations about being more enlightened or evolved or being aware. And when you look generally at your ecosystem, look at where you're living, we are not collectively aware. We might have conversations of it, but we're not experiencing it. And here's an example. If you have a society that has police, that society is not aware, because what is the purpose of the police? And that this is a sweeping general example. Some people may disagree, and that's completely fine. But what is the purpose of police?
Yeah. What is the purpose of police? It's to maintain whatever laws the country has decided that we should have.
Exactly. And if you have people who are already culturally connected through love, through compassion, and they are collectively communicating, connecting, and collaborating, they aren't going to need the police. The
True.
police is for people who the police are necessary for societies that have extractive behaviors, and in societies where there's marginalization and there isn't an opportunity for everyone's survival needs to be taken care of. And it is possible to have a society where everyone's survival needs are addressed.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what we want. What are your views on how we make that happen? How do we get the community into that kind of situation? Well, you've opened a can of worms here.
Well, if I were to look at three steps, the first step would be to acknowledge where we are and to tell the truth. So if we are not able to collectively acknowledge this is what has happened, this is what we've done, then we can't repair. It's like if you were in uh, a DV relationship, and the person who is victimizing you wouldn't admit that that happened. um, you can't go forward. So that's the first step. The second step is to agree on a higher intention. And so that higher intention, um, the way it might look is we agree that we are going to operate from love. And even if we have a disagreement, we're still going to operate from love, listen to one another, actively listen, and actively celebrate and edify one another, just as the human body does. If we were to look at the way the human body works, a blood cell goes through the entire body, and maybe it's carrying oxygen, and it shares it with every part of the body. It doesn't go to the knee and say, well, I don't really like you because you ignored me. And also that cell doesn't have an existential crisis where it's saying, I don't know if I belong, I'm lonely. No, all of the body is designed to edify itself. So in that second step, where we're agreeing on our highest intention collectively, if we can do that, then we can progress to the next step, which is this is the way it looks in action. So we can talk about it. Now we're doing it. What are ways that everyone can have all of their survival needs met? All of us should be able to have medical care. All of us should be fed. What are ways that we can live collectively that doesn't do harm to our ecosystem? Because our ecosystem in an extractive community or nation is not separate from us. And until we as humans decide to start living in harmony, which is if we're living in an environment, that environment is made better because we are there. So those are the three steps of ways that we can neutralize or eradicate racism. And you can hear in that it does so much more.
Yeah, I think there's a place for everyone in that which is what the important thing is that it's going to we look at things in that way, in that light, then a lot of the problems in society besides racism would go a long way to being healed. So I think
That's
that
right.
could be really important.
That's right. And racism was made up. Uh, and it prevents us from being what we are. It prevents us from connecting. Uh, it prevents us from fulfilling our purpose.
Yeah. And that is such an important thing for us all to have that, to be able to fulfill our purpose. That's because when we all fulfill our purpose, then I believe the world will be a better place.
Mm. Yeah. So maybe some of Australia's legislators could watch this podcast and maybe learn something.
Yeah, well, I know a couple. We'll see what we can do. I'll just send it off to them. So I like to have a Brew the Change challenge every week where I encourage people to do something that comes from the episode. Do you have anything that you would like to offer for them to say, give this a go this week?
Absolutely. It's a lot of people that I might have historically that I've had this conversation with, they try to make excuses. And before you have this conversation, don't be in a dysregulated space. And you'll know that you're dysregulated if you start making excuses, if you become defensive, or the conversation becomes too much. So get yourself in a resourceful space where you have the most bandwidth to be open, and then start having the conversation. The more you practice having the conversation and listening, the more effective you're going to be as a solution to this global challenge. That doesn't have to be.
Thank you, Stone, and thank you for being a guest today. Would you like to tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. They can reach me through my site, stonegye.agency, and G is spelled Gye.
Thank you, Stone. And to everyone today, I'd like to just remind you that Chocolate and Coffee Break isn't about having the right answers. It's about choosing not to look away. So until next time, let love be the loudest voiced.